You keep asking why every connection breaks. But what you don't see is Allah isn't punishing you. He's protecting the one He wrote for you from the version of you that would have ruined it. 1. You keep calling it a pattern, but it's a divine mirror. It keeps happening, and you don't know why. You keep meeting the kind of people who make you feel everything in the beginning, and then make you feel like nothing in the end. They show up with intensity, with all the right words, with affection that feels like home. And for a moment, your heart lets go of its fear. It whispers, maybe this time. But before you can even build a future in your mind, they're already becoming distant, already changing, already showing you that you cared more than they ever did. And you sit there in silence again, wondering what's wrong with you, why you attract people who don't know how to stay, why love keeps slipping through your fingers, no matter how tightly you hold on. You start blaming your heart, your kindness, your ability to feel deeply. You think maybe if you had been colder or harder, maybe they would have stayed. But Allah is watching, and He's not silent because He doesn't care. He's silent because He's working on a level your eyes can't see yet. Because this isn't just a pattern, it's a mirror. The people you keep meeting, the ones who enter with passion and leave without explanation, they're not punishments, they're revelations. Each one is allowed into your life to reflect something inside of you that still hasn't healed. That old heartbreak you said you moved on from but still feel when no one is watching. That fear of being abandoned that makes you hold on to people even when they start hurting you. That longing to be chosen that convinces you to settle for half love just so you don't feel alone. You don't just fall in love with them. You fall in love with the idea of being seen, of finally being enough, of finally being safe. But they weren't sent to complete you. They were sent to confront you gently, painfully, precisely. Because what you still don't see is this. The version of you that keeps choosing the wrong people is the same version Allah is trying to heal. The version that still equates love with chasing, that confuses emotional chaos with passion, that thinks love means losing yourself for someone else's comfort, that apologizes just to keep someone from leaving, even when you didn't do anything wrong. You were never broken, but you were bruised. And bruised hearts don't see clearly. They don't feel worthy of pure love. They cling to intensity because they don't believe they deserve consistency. So Allah keeps sending you mirrors, wrapped in the faces of people you think you need, wrapped in attraction, wrapped in temporary comfort. But under that softness is a deeper purpose. To bring your attention to what still hurts inside of you, not so you can run from it, but so you can finally heal it. That's why the same story keeps repeating. Not because you're unlovable, but because He's trying to wake you up from a love story you weren't meant to write without Him. You keep crying over the ones who left. But what if they weren't part of your destiny, only part of your development? What if they were never meant to hold your heart, but only to stretch it, to strengthen it, to reveal the places still bleeding so you can stop hiding your wounds under hope? And I know you're tired, so tired of being soft in a world that doesn't know what to do with softness, tired of watching people walk away with pieces of you they didn't even earn, tired of hoping this is finally the person who stays, only to find yourself staring at a phone that never lights up again. But that ache inside of you, that quiet heartbreak no one knows about but Allah, it's not wasted. It's working. Because every heartbreak removed a piece of you that would have ruined the person you're actually praying for. Every goodbye peeled away another false belief you had about love. Every wrong person took with them a version of you that could never have held a sacred relationship. You thought you were ready, but Allah knew better. So He didn't answer your dua with a person, He answered it with a process. And yes, that process is painful, but it's holy, it's refining, it's protection disguised as delay, it's mercy disguised as rejection. He didn't let them stay because they would have fed the part of you He's still trying to free. The part that thinks love means proving your worth. The part that thinks silence means you did something wrong. The part that lowers its voice just to be heard. So stop blaming your heart. Stop calling yourself too much. Stop thinking you're the problem. Allah is not punishing you. He's preparing you. Because the person you're praying for, the one who will recognize your softness as strength, can't arrive until you stop giving your love to every echo of your old wounds. When the right one is written to enter, you won't need to chase. You won't need to beg. You won't need to bleed to feel seen. But for now, Allah is still healing the parts of you that kept calling chaos a soulmate. 2. These weren't people. They were surgeries with names. You thought they were people. People you were meant to love. People who came to offer you healing, warmth, companionship, maybe even forever. They entered your life quietly, or maybe they arrived like a storm. Either way, they left a mark so deep, you still feel it in the parts of you that no one else sees. But what if I told you, they weren't just people, they were surgeries. Precise, timed, necessary, not sent to fill your heart, but to open it, not to stay, but to remove what would have poisoned your future. You see, when you carry pain for too long, it begins to shape you. It becomes part of how you speak, how you trust, how you love. And Allah, the one who knows your heart better than you do, He saw the places inside you that were bleeding, not the kind of bleeding others notice, the silent kind, the kind you smile through, the kind you keep hidden under strength and, "I'm fine." So He allowed someone to enter, someone who could reach those exact wounds, someone who would unknowingly press on the bruise you never acknowledged, not to hurt you, but to expose it. Because you can't heal what you keep pretending isn't there. They weren't your soulmate. They were your scalpel. And that's why it hurt so deeply. Not because they were evil. Not because you were foolish. But because Allah used them to cut away what needed to go. The expectations you buried. The fears you normalized. The trauma you never named. They weren't just another heartbreak. They were the removal of a version of you that couldn't be trusted with the future you've been praying for. You asked Allah for love, but you still carried the mindset of survival. You still loved with fear. You still gave from emptiness and expected someone else to fill what only He can. So what did Allah do? He sent you someone with a name, a smile, a voice that made your chest feel lighter. But under all of that, they were carrying something greater, a divine assignment. And when their time was done, they didn't stay, because surgeries aren't meant to stay. They come, they cut, they remove, they leave. And what's left behind? The silence, the confusion, the ache, the deep, quiet question. Was any of it real? Yes, it was real. But it wasn't meant to be permanent. It was meant to be precise. Because Allah is not careless with your heart. He didn't allow that connection because He forgot you. He allowed it because He remembered what you asked for. And He saw what was still inside of you that would sabotage it. He saw the version of you that still loves in fear, still apologizes too much, still overgives just to feel needed, still thinks losing yourself is the price of being loved. And he said, "You can't take that version of you into what I've written for you." So he didn't send an explanation. He sent a person that would test your silence, your trust, your stability, your belief in yourself, your belief in him. And it wasn't just a lesson, it was a sacred incision. It tore you in places you didn't even know were fragile. But look at you now. You're still here, a little quieter, a little more careful, but more aware than you've ever been. You don't crave what you used to. You don't fall for the same softness disguised as sincerity. You don't entertain people who make your heart question itself. That wasn't just growth. That was healing that came from a divine cut. And yes, it came in the form of a person. But they weren't sent to complete you. They were sent to clean you. So the next time you ask, why did they come into my life just to leave? Remember, they didn't just leave. They extracted something that would have hurt you later. That conversation that cracked something inside of you. That moment they walked away without reason. That confusion that never got closure. All of it was part of a sacred operation. Allah didn't owe you an explanation, because the healing was the explanation. The change in you was the sign that it was always divine. Some people don't leave scars. They leave space. And in that space, a new version of you begins to rise. The one that can love without begging, give without collapsing, and walk away when peace is being stolen. And one day, you'll look back and whisper, "Ya Allah, thank you for not letting them stay. Thank you for cutting what I couldn't." Because the people you once called heartbreaks were really just surgeries with names. 3. Allah isn't holding back a person. He's holding back a disaster. You keep asking Allah for a person. You keep praying for love, for something real, for someone who chooses you and stays. Someone who speaks your language not just with words, but with presence. Someone who holds your heart like it's sacred. Someone who doesn't leave when things get heavy. And every time you ask, silence, no answer. Or worse, the wrong ones keep showing up. The ones who love halfway. The ones who leave too soon. The ones who smile but carry knives behind their attention. And your soul is tired. You've been so patient, so sincere, so soft. You wonder why Allah keeps holding it back, why He keeps delaying this love you've begged Him for. You start to think, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm just hard to love. But stop. Just breathe. And listen closely. Because the reason Allah is holding it back is not because you're unworthy. It's not because you're forgotten. It's not because your love is too much. It's because He sees what you can't. He sees what would have happened if He gave you what you were asking for, when you weren't ready, when your heart was still shaped by trauma, when your boundaries were still too soft, when your loneliness was still too loud, when your definition of love still included self-abandonment. You asked for a person, but He saw the disaster that would have come with it. The sleepless nights, the anxiety that would have returned, the way you would have lost yourself again, smiling when you were hurting, apologizing when you weren't wrong, shrinking just to stay wanted. He knew that if He gave you love before you healed, you'd mistake attachment for connection. You'd confuse emotional chaos for passion. You'd call control care and jealousy proof. You'd let someone else define your worth again. So He didn't give it. Not because it wasn't written, but because it wasn't time. And sometimes The delay isn't about the other person at all. It's about the version of you that would have mishandled something sacred. You don't want just any person. You want the right one. And the right one can't walk into a storm and expect peace. They can't meet you while you're still bleeding and expect to build Jannah. They can't love you properly while you're still battling your shadow. So Allah paused the story to protect the very thing you were praying for. He didn't want your future to be born in a moment of desperation. He didn't want your heart to build a home on a shaky foundation. He knows how easily your softness can turn into surrender. How quickly you forgive things that should have been red flags. How much you want to be loved, even if it means hurting quietly to keep the peace. He didn't want that cycle to repeat. Not this time. Not again. So instead of giving you the person, He gave you distance. He gave you silence. He gave you yourself, so you could finally see. It's not that you weren't ready for love. It's that you weren't ready to stop surviving. Love requires presence. It requires wholeness. It requires the version of you that no longer bends just to keep someone from leaving. And you're getting there. Every lonely night has shaped you. Every unanswered dua has matured you. Every person who didn't choose you has quietly taught you how to choose yourself. Allah isn't holding back a person. He's holding back a storm that would have destroyed you. He's holding back another round of begging for crumbs. Another chapter of trying to convince someone to stay. Another silent suffering that would have broken you behind closed doors. Because when Allah writes a love story, it doesn't come to test your dignity. It doesn't arrive on the back of fear. It doesn't ask you to change your soul to be worthy of love. The one He writes for you will come with ease, with safety, with clarity. No guessing, no games, no performing. But to receive that love, you must become someone who no longer craves chaos. Someone who doesn't feel lost in silence. Someone who finds peace in waiting because they trust the one who's writing. And maybe that's why it hasn't come yet. Not because it's denied, but because Allah doesn't want you to damage something holy with a heart still haunted by the past. He knows that love isn't just about who walks into your life. It's about who you become before they arrive. So if you're still alone, still wondering, still crying over the silence, know this: Allah isn't ignoring your pain. He's protecting your peace. He's safeguarding the kind of love that doesn't come with sharp edges. He's holding back what your soul wants, to give you what your soul truly needs. And one day, you'll understand. One day, you'll meet the person who reminds you of nothing you've ever known, because they feel like an answer, not a lesson. And in that moment, you'll look back and whisper, Ya Allah, thank you for not giving me what I begged for, because you were saving me from a disaster I didn't see coming. 4. They weren't sent to stay. They were sent to burn a weakness out of you. You thought they were sent to stay, to build something real, to hold you through the chaos, to be the one who didn't leave when things got hard. But they weren't sent for that. They were sent for something far more important. They were sent to burn something out of you, to extract a weakness you didn't even know you still carried. They weren't your future. They were the flame that revealed the parts of you that weren't ready for the future. And yes, it felt like love, because fire always feels warm before it starts to hurt. They came into your life like a blessing. You felt seen. You felt chosen. You felt like maybe finally Allah was answering your dua. So, you opened up. You softened. You gave them access to places no one else had been. But they weren't there to build. They were there to break. to break the pride you still wrapped around your pain, to break the illusions you still called love, to break the idea that healing could come from someone else's presence. Allah knew what was still inside you, the insecurities, the overthinking, the silent, begging to be enough. And He knew, if you carried those things into the love story He wrote for you, you'd destroy it. So He sent fire, not to punish you, to purify you. And the fire looked like a person, with a soft smile, a kind voice, a presence that felt like safety at first. But as time passed, you started to shrink. You started to doubt yourself again. You started to ask questions like, why do I feel invisible? Why do I feel like I'm the only one trying? And you stayed. Even when your soul started whispering, this isn't what you prayed for, because something inside you still believed that love had to hurt to be real. That being chosen meant being patient with mistreatment. But Allah was watching, and He let it burn. He let the disappointment crack you open. He let the silence grow. He let the confusion sharpen, because every second with them was burning off a version of you that couldn't enter your future, the version that tolerated half-love, the version that silenced itself to keep someone else comfortable, the version that feared being alone more than it feared being disrespected. So it ended. Suddenly, painfully, without closure, and you were left in ashes wondering what went wrong. But look closer. Nothing went wrong. Something went right. A piece of you died that needed to. The part that confused chaos for chemistry. The part that needed constant reassurance to feel worthy. The part that gave endlessly just to avoid being abandoned. That fire? It didn't destroy you. It destroyed what was destroying you. And that's why Allah allowed it. He didn't want you to carry weakness into something sacred. He didn't want you to offer someone your heart while still bleeding from the past. He didn't want you to depend on another human being for a strength that only comes from Him. So He sent someone who triggered everything. Someone who made you question your worth. Someone who left when you needed them most. Because the real test wasn't how much you loved them. It was whether you'd finally love yourself enough to walk away. And when you did, or when they walked first, the real healing began. The silence became a sanctuary. The loneliness became a mirror. And in that mirror, you met the version of you that didn't need to chase anymore. You met the strength that had been buried under pleasing. You met the clarity that had been drowned in overthinking. You met the peace that only comes when everything false is burned to the ground. And no, they didn't stay. They were never meant to. Because if they had, you would have stayed small. You would have stayed dependent. You would have stayed stuck in a love that felt like survival. But now you're becoming. Now you're rising. Now your love is starting to feel like worship, not desperation. So don't regret it. Don't regret trusting. Don't regret caring. Don't regret the softness you gave them. Because that fire didn't just take something from you. It returned something to you. Your power, your vision, your worth. And one day, you'll whisper to yourself in sujood, Ya Allah, thank you for the ones who didn't stay, because they burned away the parts of me that would have ruined what you wrote for me. 5. Some rejections weren't lessons, they were extractions. They left, and it didn't make sense. You gave them everything. You showed up with sincerity. You loved with both hands open, trembling, real. You tried to be patient, tried to be gentle, tried to be enough, but they still walked away, sometimes quietly, sometimes coldly, Sometimes with excuses that felt like lies, and sometimes with no words at all. And you kept replaying it. Every moment, every smile, every red flag you overlooked, every softness you gave, every boundary you ignored just to keep the connection alive. You blamed yourself. You asked Allah why. You cried into your pillow not just from heartbreak, but from confusion, because it didn't feel like a normal ending. It felt like something was ripped out of your life violently, suddenly, with no warning, and maybe no closure. But here's the truth you haven't fully allowed yourself to see yet. It wasn't a rejection. It was an extraction. Allah didn't just let them leave. He removed them, pulled them out of your timeline like a thorn from your chest. Not because you were wrong for loving them, but because keeping them would have cost you your soul. You think they broke your heart, but really, they were breaking your alignment, and Allah couldn't allow that. Not when you've been making sincere du'as, not when you've been asking Him to guide your life, not when you've been whispering, "Ya Allah, only bring what is good for me." So He answered you, not with a yes, not with a new person, but with a removal, because had they stayed, you would have stayed anxious. You would have stayed overthinking. You would have stayed bending backwards to keep someone who never planned on staying straight. You would have mistaken survival for companionship. You would have kept quiet when your soul was screaming. You would have built a house on a foundation that was already cracking. So Allah pulled them out, not to hurt you, to save you. And yes, it hurt, because we don't just grieve people. We grieve the versions of ourselves we became around them. We grieve the hope we wrapped around their presence. We grieve the softness we gave that they never gave back. But if they had stayed, you would have lost so much more. Your light, your direction, your voice, your closeness to Allah. They weren't just the wrong person. They were the wrong door. And you kept knocking, kept waiting, kept believing it would open to something beautiful. But Allah saw what was behind that door. He saw the delay in your growth, the spiritual drain, the emotional instability that would have come in waves. And He knew that door had to be shut. So He shut it for you, even though it broke your heart, even though you didn't understand, even though it felt like punishment. It was actually a surgical act of mercy. And now, you're here, sitting in silence, trying to gather the pieces, trying to make sense of the why. But look deeper. What left your life was never meant to be part of your divine story. It was only written to enter, disrupt, awaken, and then exit. Their purpose wasn't to stay. It was to pull out a version of you that kept settling, kept shrinking, kept doubting your worth. They left so that you could rise. And maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're still missing them, still wondering what could have been, still wishing the goodbye had come with a proper explanation. But trust this, if you could see what Allah saw, you would have let them go even sooner. Because some people don't leave when it's time. They stay past the moment of their benefit. And when we won't let go, Allah intervenes. He doesn't always ask. Sometimes He just removes. Because what you couldn't release, He knew would ruin the version of you He's trying to build. So the next time you think, "They rejected me," replace it with, "Allah extracted them because I didn't yet have the strength to." That wasn't a breakup. It was a sacred pulling, like a toxin removed from your bloodstream, like a vine untangled from your ribs, like a lie being peeled off your identity. And yes, it hurts. But pain isn't always a sign of loss. Sometimes it's proof of surgery, and surgery always comes before healing. You didn't lose them. You were freed from them. Because what Allah writes for you will never require you to lose yourself. It will never ask you to quiet your soul just to be heard. It will never pull you away from your deen. It will never trade your peace for their presence. So if they left, let them stay gone. If they vanished, trust that they were pulled. If they didn't choose you, thank Allah that He did. Because some rejections aren't rejections at all. They're the beginning of your realignment, the protection of your soul, the mercy that feels like pain. And one day, you'll whisper in sujood with tears in your eyes, Ya Allah, I didn't understand it then, but now I see. You weren't taking something from me. You were pulling out what was never mine to keep. 6. You kept mistaking clarity for cruelty. They didn't change. They revealed. You keep thinking something went wrong, that something shifted, that maybe you weren't enough anymore, that maybe your softness tired them, that maybe your love made them feel too seen, and they couldn't handle it. But that's not the truth. They didn't become cruel. They became clear. And you kept calling it heartbreak. But it was revelation. Because Allah doesn't just answer your du'as by giving you people. Sometimes He answers by exposing them. He lets you see their heart. Not when they're performing. Not when they're winning you over. But when they get comfortable. When the masks fall. When your value no longer serves them. When your attention becomes familiar. That's when the unveiling begins. The coldness, the withdrawal, the vague excuses, the silence that wasn't there before. You think it's rejection, but it's exposure. And that's what hurts the most. Not just that they left, but that they made you believe they were someone they never truly were. But the truth is, you didn't lose love. You lost an illusion. You lost the version of them that lived in your hopes, not the one who was actually standing in front of you. And Allah knew, if He didn't reveal it now, you'd keep building a future with a lie. You'd keep writing a love story that was never real. So He let the illusion crack. He let the disappointment unfold. He let the truth sting, not to break you, but to free you. Because clarity doesn't always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels like cruelty, especially when you were emotionally invested in the version you made up in your mind. You weren't in love with them. You were in love with what they could have been, what they briefly pretended to be, what your loneliness needed them to be. But when Allah removes the veil, it's not to hurt you. It's to show you, this isn't what you think it is. This isn't where you're meant to stay. And yes, it's hard. Because now you have to grieve a story you wrote alone. You have to mourn the future that only existed in your imagination. You have to sit with the realization that you were trying to love someone who didn't even love themselves enough to stay true. But that's where the healing begins. When you stop blaming yourself for how they changed. When you stop calling their withdrawal your fault. When you realize that what felt like cruelty was really just Allah shining a light on what you couldn't see in the dark. They didn't love you less. They just stopped acting. They didn't get cold. They just stopped pretending to be warm. And you? You kept giving from your heart because that's all you've ever known how to do. You stayed kind. You stayed hopeful. You stayed present even when they weren't. And Allah saw that. Every bit of it. The way you kept holding on. The way you kept forgiving the distance. The way you kept lowering your needs just to keep them from walking away. So He stepped in. He let the truth rise to the surface, unfiltered, unkind, unmissable. Not because he wanted you to break, but because he wanted you to finally stop shrinking. He knew you were about to give your whole soul to someone who only wanted your silence. He knew you were about to build a home with someone who didn't even want to stay long enough to plant roots. He knew your softness was being spent on someone who saw it as weakness, not strength. So the curtain was pulled. And what you saw wasn't pretty. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't what you prayed for. But it was honest. And honesty is mercy, even when it hurts. You weren't abandoned. You were shown. You weren't being punished. You were being protected. Because love should never confuse you. It should never make you question your worth. It should never ask you to guess where you stand. But you were doing all of that. You were sitting by your phone, waiting for replies that used to come quickly. You were rereading old messages, trying to find the moment they started fading. You were convincing yourself to stay, even though your heart was already halfway gone. And that's when Allah whispered, "That's enough." He let them show you who they really were, not out of cruelty, but so you could stop imagining who they weren't. And now you're here, healing, hurt, confused. But deep down, something feels clearer. You can feel the weight lifting. Even if it still aches, you're not carrying the illusion anymore. You're no longer investing in confusion, no longer chasing validation, no longer mistaking silence for shyness or distance for depth. You're finally seeing things for what they are, not what you wanted them to be. And that's growth. That's wisdom. That's divine clarity. So if someone changed on you, if someone became distant, cold, inconsistent, don't beg for their warmth to return. That warmth was never real. It was conditional. And when their conditions weren't met, their mask slipped. Don't chase what Allah removed. Don't cling to what He exposed. Don't label protection as loss. And most of all, don't let the pain make you hard. Stay soft. Stay sincere. But this time, learn to recognize clarity, even when it comes wrapped in what feels like cruelty. Because when Allah shows you the truth, no matter how much it hurts, that truth is what will save you. Not just from them, but from a future you would have destroyed yourself trying to hold together. And one day, you'll whisper through tears, "Ya Allah, thank you for showing me, even when I didn't want to see, even when it shattered me, because now I'm finally free." 7. You can't attract what you're still sabotaging. You keep asking Allah to send someone real, someone sincere, someone safe, someone who stays. And you mean it. Your heart is exhausted. You're tired of guessing, tired of people who play with your peace, tired of being strong just to keep love alive. So you pray, you cry, you wait, you whisper into the night, "Ya Allah, when?" But what if the delay isn't about them? What if it's about you? What if Allah isn't just protecting you from the wrong one? He's protecting the right one from the version of you that would sabotage it. Because here's the truth. You can't attract what you're still afraid to hold. You can't welcome something beautiful when you still expect it to leave. You can't carry a soul-deep love when you keep dropping your own worth every time you feel alone. You say you're ready, but the parts of you that panic when someone gets too close, they're not. The parts of you that overthink every word, that confuse silence with rejection, that chase even after being disrespected, they're not ready. Not because you're not worthy, but because you're still bleeding. And bleeding hearts don't attract love. They attract patterns, loops, tests, reflections. You keep meeting the same kind of person because deep inside you're still living through the same kind of wound. And Allah is trying to break that loop, not by sending someone to fix it, but by sending silence to force you to face it. He wants you to see the version of yourself that clings, that doubts, that performs just to feel accepted, that apologizes for needing reassurance, that keeps proving your worth like you're on trial for love. Because if he sent the one you're praying for right now, you wouldn't recognize it. You'd question it. You'd fear it. You'd sabotage it. You'd pull away the moment it felt safe. Because your nervous system still confuses peace with danger. You'd test them, push them, try to earn what was already yours. And they'd leave. Not because they didn't love you, but because you were still fighting a war that ended years ago. That's why Allah is delaying it. Not to torture you, but to rebuild you, to rewire your patterns, to help you understand. You don't need to earn what's already written. You don't need to bleed for love to feel deep. You don't need to lose yourself just to be kept. You're still attracting confusion because you haven't healed the part of you that chooses it. You're still sabotaging safety because you don't believe you deserve it yet. And until you do, the right one will remain hidden because they're not sent to rescue you. They're sent to meet the version of you that no longer needs rescuing, the version of you that isn't ruled by fear, that doesn't chase what pulls away, that doesn't shrink when someone's love feels conditional, the version that knows love doesn't arrive to complete you. It arrives when you've already remembered you were complete the whole time. So right now, Allah is working on your roots. He's teaching you patience, not just with the weight, but with your own becoming. He's letting the wrong people exit violently so that your next connection feels peaceful by contrast. He's letting your silence feel loud, so you start listening to what you used to drown out. He's letting your loneliness burn, so you stop begging others to fill what only his presence can satisfy. Because when you stop sabotaging your softness, when you stop negotiating your standards, when you stop calling your fear intuition, you'll begin to attract differently. Not people who reflect your trauma, but people who reflect your healing. Not the ones who drain your spirit, but the ones who protect your silence. And that shift doesn't start with them. It starts with you. You become more peaceful, so your heart stops being attracted to chaos. You become more certain, so you no longer confuse tension with love. You become more whole, so you no longer make a home out of people who treat you like a temporary escape. And that's when it happens. Not when you're begging for the right person, but when you finally become the version of you who would never let the wrong one stay. So don't ask Allah, where are they? Ask instead, who am I becoming while I wait? Because that's the real question. That's the real transformation. And when that shift happens, you won't have to chase. You won't have to perform. You won't have to beg. The right one will feel like alignment, like a door you didn't force open, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding, like peace that doesn't need explanation. But for now, be honest. Are you still pushing away what you're praying for? Are you still afraid of what you claim you want? Are you still wearing wounds like armor, hoping someone will love you enough to take it off for you? Because the truth is, that's your job. And Allah is waiting, not with punishment, with mercy, with love, with silence that teaches you who you really are. beneath the fear, beneath the self-doubt, beneath the survival. And when you become that person, the one who doesn't sabotage softness, the one who doesn't trade peace for presence, the one who doesn't flinch when love arrives with clarity, that's when Allah will open the door. Not a second before, not a moment too soon. And you'll whisper in sujood, Ya Allah, I see now. I wasn't waiting on them. I was waiting on me. 8. Allah isn't late. He's still rewriting the version of you that can love without losing yourself. You think it's taking too long. You think Allah forgot. You think maybe your name didn't make it into that divine love story everyone else seems to be living. People around you are getting engaged, married, reunited, settled. And you're still sitting with silence, still holding on to unanswered du'as, still wondering why it hasn't happened for you yet. And the thought starts to whisper, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I missed the chance, the sign, the timing. But listen carefully. Allah is not late. He's just not done rewriting you yet. Because what you're asking for isn't just a relationship, it's a love that reflects Jannah. It's a love that holds space for your soul, protects your peace, and honors your softness. And that kind of love can only meet the version of you that no longer loses yourself to be loved. So right now, Allah is still editing the version of you that used to call fear intuition, that used to confuse being needed with being valued, that used to settle for presence even when it came without peace. He's still rewriting the part of you that used to say yes just to avoid abandonment, that used to overgive, over-explain, overstay, that used to believe love had to hurt to be deep. You prayed for something real. But real love doesn't recognize the version of you that still builds futures with people who treat your soul like a side story. So Allah is taking His time, not because He's forgotten, but because He's perfecting. You want someone who's emotionally stable, spiritually rooted, gentle, consistent, protective. But would the old you know what to do with someone like that? Would the version of you that used to beg for closure know how to hold peace when it finally arrives? Or would you question it, push it, sabotage it, just to prove to yourself that the world will always abandon you? Allah saw that. He saw that you were still loving from memory, not from healing. Still carrying old grief into new prayers, still chasing what resembled what hurt you because it was familiar. So He pressed pause, not to punish, but to prepare, because the love you're praying for is meant to be held with clean hands, soft breath, a heart that no longer makes a home out of chaos. He's teaching you to love yourself without performance, to walk away without guilt, to choose peace even if it means being alone longer, to stop thinking love has to arrive loudly to be real. He's showing you how to become the kind of person who doesn't just want the right one, but who can protect them when they arrive. Because here's the part you haven't fully seen yet. The person you're praying for, they're also praying. And they're also being rewritten. They're also being delayed for your protection, because if they arrived now, you might meet too soon. Before both of you know how to love without bleeding, before both of you know how to stay when things get silent, before both of you stop trying to fix what Allah already healed. So yes, it's taking time, because real love requires real versions of you, not the one shaped by survival, not the one who keeps trading clarity for intensity, not the one who tries to hold everyone else, but still drops their own soul in the process. This rewrite, this quiet season, is not punishment. It's your final edit, the divine version of you that will no longer break in the presence of beauty, but rise with it. It's the you who knows their worth, even when someone walks away. The you who no longer needs to be chosen to feel complete. The you who loves from overflow, not emptiness. Because Allah knows, if He gave you what you're asking for too soon, you would have loved them in the same way you loved everyone else, by losing pieces of yourself just to be kept. But now, you're learning to be whole before love. You're learning that love is not the reward. Growth is. Peace is. His nearness is. And that's why He's waiting. Not because you're late, but because He wants this love to feel like a gift, not a lifeline. He wants it to arrive when you don't need it to survive, but are finally ready to protect it with grace, not fear. So, if you're still in the season of not yet, hold on. Keep becoming. Keep cleaning your heart. Keep letting go of the version of you that used to accept love that felt like punishment. Because what's coming is not like anything you've experienced before. It won't confuse you. It won't demand a performance. It won't ask you to break your back, to prove you're worthy. It will arrive slowly, quietly, clearly. And this time, you'll be ready. You won't chase. You won't question. You won't shrink, because you'll recognize it, not with your eyes, but with your soul. And you'll whisper, "Ya Allah." This time, I didn't lose myself to find them. I found you, and in doing so, I finally found me. So if you're still wondering why it didn't work out, why they left, why every love keeps slipping through your hands, it's not because you're broken. It's not because you're hard to love. It's because Allah is still rewriting you into someone who no longer sacrifices their soul just to be seen. And the one He wrote for you, they're not late. They're being protected, just like you. One day, love will arrive. Not with confusion, not with fear, not with begging, but with peace. And when it does, you'll realize you weren't waiting for them. You were waiting to become the version of you that finally loves, without losing yourself. Until then, keep becoming, keep healing, and never forget, Allah removes what you thought you needed, to make room for what He wrote before you were ever wounded.